listen to the entire hour, even in pieces if you have to, and understand the stuff that Lee had to say. But we're going to present sort of the sequel to Lee's interview first. The direct primary care legislation we're talking about is that legislation which allows individuals to use their health savings account money, pre-tax money, to pay their annual direct primary care fee. Remember, direct primary care, very briefly, if you haven't heard already, sort of gets around insurance almost completely for your care, and does get around it completely for routine care. You pay your primary doctor a regular monthly fee for essentially unlimited access, and access to a range of services, which includes, of course, doctor visits, but it is also going to include, potentially, but not always, routine labs. You get a sprained ankle and you need a splint. You get a cut and you need sutures. Those sorts of basic primary care things. That range of services is available for a flat monthly fee, which is far less expensive than your insurance. And then wrapped around that is cash fees for things like CAT scans and more exotic labs. And then wrapped around that is a catastrophic insurance policy that covers the, God forbid, events such as cancer and car accidents and that sort of thing. And that sort of scheme to cover health care is far less expensive than traditional insurance, which, as you know, most recently under Obamacare has had skyrocketing prices, actually for decades, not just with Obamacare. Obamacare was just the latest chapter in that long book. But direct primary care reverses all that, makes healthcare far cheaper, and this legislation allows you to use pre-tax dollars in your healthcare savings account to pay the monthly fee for direct primary care. So last week, when we talked to Dr. Gross, and you'll hear this again later in the hour, this bill got out of committee. It had some significant issues. The two biggest ones being a cap on how much the monthly fee can be, and even worse, strict limits on what a direct primary care physician can provide for that monthly fee. And that limit was limited to what we call E&M services, or evaluation and management services. That means your doctor could see you under a monthly fee, but couldn't do anything else. If you need labs, you couldn't do it. If you needed your ankle wrapped because you sprained it and an inflatable splint put on it, they couldn't do that. And so there was, stitch up a cut on your arm, couldn't do that. And so that really hampered the ability of your direct primary care physician to be a little more than a consultant. You could talk a lot, but you couldn't do anything. Well, happily, that provision has been removed. So the limitations based only on evaluation and management codes. So now, under this bill, you can pay with your HSA pre-tax money, and your direct primary care physician is freer to provide you with stitches for a cut, splints for a twisted ankle, whatever. And that's a huge win. That is a huge win, and Dr. Gross was a huge part of the effort to make that happen. So that's a very good thing. There are still monetary caps, $150 a month for an individual and $300 a month for a family, which is a pretty high cap. I don't think anybody's going to bump up against that number. But the idea of setting caps on cost arbitrarily is a very slippery slope and still a problem. But I am also happy to report that the bill passed the House. 277 to 142 last week. I presume that's probably along party lines, although I haven't researched that. That's a pretty educated and probably pretty accurate guess. So part one of the moving chess pieces is that the direct primary care bill that allows us to use HSA pre-tax funds to pay for direct primary care has passed the House. And that, I think, is generally a good thing. Although if you survey the DPC community overall, feelings are still a bit mixed. Congress has still demonstrated its ability to screw up a one-car funeral here and keep some limitations on direct primary care paid for by an HSA that cause some problems. And some of those problems have to do with conflicts between this federal proposed law and state laws, which I think in about almost half of states now to allow direct primary care. There is some conflicting language that is still threatens to create a problem. So part one of the moving chess pieces. The DPC bill is moving along, has passed the House, goes on to the Senate, where hopefully they can correct some of these fixes. We also know direct primary care will clearly be on the radar of the White House because of this, as well as the tireless work by Dr. Lee Gross and others. So that's part one. Part two is something that you may have heard on the news that doesn't make a lot of, it doesn't, you don't notice it very much unless you understand the context. And it has to do with this archaic sounding thing called a short-term limited duration insurance policy. And this is something that Obamacare sort of allowed but had a lot of restrictions on, and the Trump administration has issued a lot of executive orders to expand this. And this will really help consumers. It will especially be helpful with direct primary care because remember, as I said a few minutes ago, to have full health coverage under direct primary care, you need, number one, your DPC doctor and a monthly fee. Number two, your DPC doctor has already negotiated highly discounted cash prices for more exotic, unusual services, such as if you need a CAT scan of your sinuses or your abdomen, let's say, that cash price has been pre-negotiated. So that's kind of the first layer around the core DPC. And then the second layer is this catastrophic only policy to cover the God forbid events like car accidents and cancer and that kind of thing. And that's where these short-term limited duration insurance policies come in because those are ideal to purchase a catastrophic policy. So you are now covered at all levels of care, from the routine to the somewhat unusual to the highly unusual and potentially devastating. There is now a plan for any of those situations. And the Trump administration has recently expanded the scope of short-term limited duration insurance so that you can renew it up to 3 years, which is quite a long time, and things will change after 3 years. So 3 years is a reasonable number to work with. So those are the major legislative and regulatory chess pieces that are moving around in the short term. In addition, we've got some things that CMS is doing in the proposals for 2019, and some of these proposals are pretty radical. They're pretty impressive, I've got to say. Probably the biggest one are the proposed coding changes for physicians proposed for 2019. Now, before I explain what the changes are, you sort of have to understand where things are currently. And if you're a doc, you understand this already, so bear with me. If you're not a physician, you need the walkthrough here so that you understand the significance of what CMS is proposing for Medicare. So when your physician sees you,